If you would have told me back when I had 49 cents in my bank account, 120K in debt, that in 2 years I could have like $7 million in my bank account for something that we had built and like that I'm proud of. Pretty amazing upside. I was working very hard, but nothing that paid me. I had 49 cents in my bank account, would have said yes to literally anything. The default action in life is inaction. I remember just going down to Manhattan Beach and sitting on the pier. It was like one of the saddest I've ever been. I was like, I'm so close to like this like dream that I wanted in the most embarrassing way possible. Got like rejected after an hour of this day-long interview. And I was just sitting on the pier by myself. Pretty fucking humbling.
You basically rejected a huge acquisition offer.
We said, fuck that to the 30 million.
You've just graduated college. You've got 100K in debt. You've got a couple of life choices ahead of you. I want to talk about that period in time and specifically a phone call you got from Austin.
Yeah, so 120K in debt for those counting at home.
Okay.
I grew up very middle to low class and basically took out all of my university through college and student loans. So, and then typically when people do that, they work very hard during college and like kind of repay the loan. I was working very hard, but nothing that paid me. I started a company in college while in undergrad, my sophomore year, and basically tried building this company through sophomore, junior, senior year. And it didn't pay the bills because we were an unprofitable startup trying to figure out monetization. So I basically forewent any sort of income for 3 years while taking out like $25,000 student loans every year. Mm-hmm. And that when that sounds okay, if the company is going to be the next billion-dollar company or even just be able to pay the bills.
Just something.
Unfortunately, it didn't. And so fast forward to graduation, I don't have a source of income. I moved back home to my parents' house. I'm living in my basement. And there's a clock of like 6 months after you graduate before your student loan payments start being due, where I have to start like paying.
Is it that quick?
It's like,
That's
insane.
It's like
6 months. So I have to pay $800 a month or so in student debt. So that's like the time clock I'm working with. I think I tinker around with my two co-founders for like 2 more months. And I'm like, look, different place. I just can't do this. I have to figure out what's next and start like actually bringing in income. So gave up my dream. The dream at the time was like, building this company, gave that up and began just like freelancing and building different websites. I love Shopify. Shopify was something I found in 2016. I mean, it's been around before then, but I discovered it in 2016 and thought it was like so incredible that all of these offline stores can build beautiful online websites, sell it. It's like I built a Shopify store for my grandfather's shoe store downtown in Baltimore. They're like in a physical location. And I was like, look, you sell amazing shoes. We can do this online. We can sell in like the Baltimore, Maryland, or like honestly anywhere in the country. And I'll build this website for you. They paid me $1,000 for that, which was amazing. I think it was underutilized on their end, but like that was like the type of work I was doing. I was just looking for anything that I could build as a self-taught software developer to bring in any sort of income. And then I caught up one day.
Is that why Shopify was so attractive to you? Because you could just go in at yourself and it was like permissionless to start creating websites, or?
Yeah, Shopify is amazing, and I think like the stock price and success has like spoken for itself. But the fact that like the paradigm before that was like syncing up your own payment portal, having to accept credit cards, having to manage shipping and inventory, and even just building a website that people wanted to go and visit, like was a huge step forward from like what was possible before Shopify. And again, like lowering the barriers of entry and kind of combining multiple facets of what it means to sell a product online in a single platform, right? Without having to need to know how to code. Like I was doing custom sites and like kind of like tweaking things, but you can have no technical background and build a beautiful Shopify site and sell thousands of dollars of merch that day. So it was definitely very attractive. If I had any more than $0 in my bank account, I would have invested everything into Shopify back then. I have texts on my phone telling all my friends to invest. And it was like in the stage when we first graduated from college, most people had a bit more income than I did, but we had a little bit of capital like to play around with like Robinhood and invest in things. And I was like, yo, Shopify is like my bet. Would be wealthier if I had any. Some of them did, but I mean, I'd be a lot wealthier if I had any bit of money to put into that bet. Maybe it was like hard. It was less believable to follow my lead when I'm like, this is what I would do, but I have like, I'm the brokest out of all of us. So it was around that time. It was like after I graduated college, gave up on my startup, living at home, have student debt payments coming up. I connect with Austin Reef, who is a childhood friend. We both grew up in Baltimore. Funny enough, we lived in Israel a summer together when I was building my startup, and he had just started Morning Brew. And he was telling me about this email newsletter, him and his friend write it, that goes out to like a few thousand people every morning. And I was like, that's cute, but like I'm building like a tech startup, like a two-sided marketplace. Like we're building some real tech out here, and you're just sending an email. And like fast forward a few years, and obviously that's like I'm still doing email. So fast forward a decade, and here I am. Yeah, but Austin we were just like catching up for like an hour on the phone. And he was like super excited. He was like studying the Barstool business. He's like 30-40% of their revenue at the time is from like merch. Like they just launched merch very quickly, which wasn't possible in like a previous paradigm. But with like drop shipping and Shopify, it's like a new thing that's possible. They had this like early fandom of the newsletter and everything from like just the habits that they were building. And so he was kind of like talking about that. And I was like, dude, I'll do this for you tomorrow. And then he was like, there's also these companies like Axios and the Skim who have like a more robust tech ecosystem. They allow you to share the story. Like every story you can share on like Facebook or on like Twitter. And now it's whatever. But at the time it was like, oh, here's content that you've already created. Make it like one click to share. Like you just read this interesting story and share your thoughts about it. He's like, I'd love to have that. There's already a playbook for it. We just don't have an engineer to build this. And I was like, sure, dude. I mean, I'll do this tomorrow if you want me to. He's like, you know how to do this? It was like, they had like a janky WordPress website that like some freelancer built, like a college freelancer built them. And I was like, dude, of course I know how to do this. Everyone does. Had no idea what I was doing. Like literally it's the screenshot that I posted on LinkedIn the other week, but I had 49 cents in my bank account, would have said yes to literally anything. And we went forward. I almost quit like 3 or 4 times during this 3-week period. Because the truth is, like, yes, I was like bullshitting my way to get the opportunity. I had no idea what I was doing. And it sounds good in theory, but at like 3 a.m. when you're like deep in these WordPress files trying to figure out what's going on and nothing's working, it's like very hard to push forward. But I didn't quit. And then as soon as I launched it, he paid me the $3,000. He's like, we have like 20 other things we've been wanting to do. We just don't have someone to do it. Do you want to keep working with us? And one thing led to the next. I worked with them all summer, and it eventually led to a full-time job.
Yeah, you turned down a job offer that you had. I think you already signed it with Deloitte. Moving to a different city. Like, what in those early days of that work made you think, you know what, fucking, I'm not going to join this job where it's like cushy. Like, I mean, Morning Brew was still, I think, only 40,000 subs when you joined, or even less probably. It is a risk. So like, why'd you decide to do that? Like, what was the deciding factor?
Yeah, when I was doing this work for Morning Brew, I never wanted to work at Morning Brew. Like, I just needed money at the time, legitimately. Like he had a list of projects that he needed me to do that he was willing to pay for, and I had no money, so I was saying yes to them. But the entire time that summer, I was applying to I applied to SpaceX. I actually got flown out to LA and like interviewed, which is a whole nother story and also super embarrassing. I lasted 20 minutes in an interview and they're like, this isn't for you. But they already
talk about that then.
They already flew me out. That was like one of the most humiliating like experience, like very humbling. But like I was applying for like other entry level like software or like mechanical engineering jobs, consulting jobs. My plan was never Morning Brew. Morning Brew paid the bills while I was applying. And eventually push came to shove. I got a job opportunity at like Deloitte, which is like a big thing at University of Maryland. Like a lot of engineers go into technology consulting. It's right by Washington, D.C. And so there's a bunch of consulting firms there. Good paying job, like $75K right out of college. Benefits, health insurance, 401k. My family is nearby. I had a girlfriend that lived in Washington, D.C. Like all my friends lived in Washington, D.C. So it was like the easy next step.
The logical choice.
It was super easy, right? I could drive 40 minutes and be at my apartment in Washington, D.C. I can commute 10 minutes to the office, and I have a well-paying job that Deloitte is not going anywhere, and like I can start paying my student loans.
Insane amount of debt.
And funny enough, like I went up to New York over the summer because Morning Brew hosted a happy hour, and Austin's like, "Yo, you should come up." And while we were talking over like a few beers, he's like, "Dude, we're gonna hire like an engineer from Facebook and like really scale this thing." Like, and that kind of told me like I wasn't the fucking guy to do this, right?
You're gone.
I'm a self-taught software developer who's like figuring things out like on the fly, and he's talking about like hiring like a software engineer from Facebook. So I've read between the lines. I was like, "This isn't for me," but that's fine. I'm applying elsewhere. Again, Morning Brew was never on the agenda. And one day he was like, "Yo, do you want to join full time? Like you've been crushing it. You've been working for the entire summer." Truly had never thought about it up until that point. And again, you said they had 50,000 subscribers on an email list. It was Alex and Austin as the two co-founders and a writer, Neil. And they were working out of like a like NYU dorm office situation, like very low budget, like just figuring it out themselves. And so I had like these two paths of like very sure thing in Deloitte that pays the bills and will de-risk my life in the short term, or like joining Morning Brew. And what actually appealed to Morning Brew is like through the summer, they gave me, it's just like any other startup. They don't have time to like do like permissions and access. Like they just give you access to everything. And I was in the inbox every morning, like testing how everything looked, because I was like building the emails, and the fandom of people raving that like they read it every morning. They've told their parents, their friends, their students. Like there was like a real early like cult and like fandom built around Morning Brew that I saw. And then Austin's selling me, I'm like, with this like fandom, we can expand to different verticals. We can do education. We can do merch. There's so many different paths we can take. And now that we have the attention of this like very attractive audience. And so that is partially what sold me. And then at the end of the day, like my friend, another Austin, gave me a call when I was like, wait, I had Austin de-risk the situation for 3 weeks. Like no joke, he like pulled P&Ls and was like, hey, if we stop making money tomorrow, we can pay you through next year. Because I was like purely in like risk averse, like I cannot afford not to pay my like debt. And like this is a big opportunity to like pick up my life, move to New York, which is what he wanted me to do, drop all my friends, my girlfriend, my job, like everything that I've already like signed. I already signed a lease in DC. And my other friend Austin was like, you can be one of 50,000 people at Deloitte, or you could be the only person in the world building Morning Brew. And that like just struck me and was like, bet on yourself and just fucking send it. And I did it. I left my friend who I had a lease with in DC to go up to New York. Like, and like, again, like not a New York kid, like went up there wide-eyed, 22 years old, ton of debt, like joining this like early stage company that we had no real game plan. And it was literally just like build as quickly as possible and ship things to help grow the newsletter. And it was like an incredible wild ride.
What was the feeling like, or what was the scariest moment or most memorable moment? I mean, I can imagine there's a ton of things, right? Like telling your parents, or, you know, breaking up with your girlfriend, or even breaking the lease with a good friend of yours. Like, which one of those conversations did you most dread, or was like the hardest to have? Because I feel like, to your point, like that's the easy thing, right? It's like, hey, I've already got this all here. My friends, it's going to be safe and easy. Like it's predictable. Like, what was the hardest part of that?
Honestly, the thing that hit me the most was like that first night in my New York apartment. I was in like the East Village on 2nd Street and B. And like, again, I'm like new to the city. I visited the city maybe 3 to 4 times in my life growing up, but like didn't grow up around the city. Move in, like it's also like my first experience like post college. I have no furniture, no bed, like nothing. It's like a shoebox empty apartment. And like I start work the next day on Monday. I mean, I've been working kind of like remote from Maryland and DC from a bit, but like go into the office for the first time. And like, you know, parents drop you off, they give you like some of your shit that you like squeeze in the car. And it's kind of like the oh shit of like what the, like now I'm paying like $3,000 in rent in this shoebox apartment. I know nothing about this neighborhood, know nothing about the city. I still have $120,000 of debt. Morning Brew's like not paying me that great. It's like $70K. I would like good enough to pay the bills, but like when you're in debt and you're paying New York City rent and you still have to buy everything, and I don't know anyone in the city, it was like a real like just like hit you in the face of like we're gonna figure things out and build this thing. But that was like the first moment where I sat back and I was like, so this is the decision I made, and I'm like in too deep to go back now. But that it didn't really hit me until like that first night, like sleeping in my empty apartment.
Did you feel any regret, or you were excited by like the uncertainty? Like, let's fucking go.
I mean, once I'm in. I think one thing that I've done over and over again is commit and sign up to things where I'm in way over my head in any given situation. Yeah. At the University of Maryland, when I was like building my startup and doing mechanical engineering undergrad, which was like a ton of work, and doing like an entrepreneurship minor. And I was like, oh, apparently this research thing is great for a resume. Like if I want to do some like engineering work later, research would be good. So I started applying to all these like research labs on campus. Mm-hmm. And I ended up doing like some capacitor research with like electrical capacitor, measuring the voltage. And I had no idea what the fuck was going on, but I just wanted research on my resume. And so I signed up for this thing that I would go for like 3 hours twice a week, in addition to like my mechanical engineering undergrad, in addition to building a startup, in addition to like all this other thing. And I was just like trying to learn how like these like charts and like how like, you know, post-grad research is done. Didn't need to do that, but like I threw myself in that situation, learned a lot. And I've like kind of always done that where I commit to something because I think I will either learn a lot from the experience, or it's the right thing to do one way or another. And Morning Brew is just like another example of like, I didn't fully think through anything, like leaving my entire life to move to New York, or just like joining a newsletter company with like, there's no roadmap. Like we're kind of like trailblazing in our own path, and we're just like trying to figure it out. But I think that's what excites me the most, which I mean, there's probably a through line to everything of like startups and entrepreneurship. Like there is no playbook. Like every day that I wake up, I had a thought last night, and like it's changing what I'm doing this week. And like before that thought, I had like a totally different game plan for this week. And so I just think like the ability to take in information, gather inspiration from something, and just like commit to doing it is what excites me the most in life, and what's obviously got me to this point.
Yeah, that's awesome. There's like 3 threads I want to pull in there. One, I want to talk about the LA SpaceX thing. I think that's amazing. I think there's a through line here to everything that you learned at Morning Brew, because you were forced to basically lead this whole team and hire people, etc. But what you mentioned, like taking in all this data, and how do you have any like strategies or any moments where you were weighing those options and, you know, remember like the decision process in that area? Like, hey, this is so much more unknown, but I think I'm going to learn a lot more, so I'm going to weigh it more valuable than, you know, this Deloitte job, or things like that. Like any decision-making frameworks that you've sort of applied and learned, or?
Yeah, I think there's something around I'm trying. I literally just listened to the podcast this morning where Jeff Bezos was talking about like his decision for Amazon was like the regret minimization framework or something. It's like, which decision will lead me to having less regret in the future, I think weighs on me a lot, because as I've learned with like building this company and like how much time and effort I've put into this, is everything is a trade-off. And me continuing to build this company is a trade-off from doing anything else. Me saying yes to certain opportunities or customers is a trade-off to other things I could be spending time on. And I try to be very thoughtful of what decisions I make and what trade-offs that leads to. And for me, it's like also where's like the highest asymmetrical upside, and then so I think it's like minimizing regret. What is like the highest asymmetrical upside? And then there's something like, what's like the best story? And I forgot who said that. It might be Elon or someone else, but like sometimes in life when you don't know which way to go, it's like, which is the best story? Because at the end of the day, a lot of life is your narrative and your story that you're telling yourself, and whether you are gaining skills, building new things, launching new things, traveling, you're kind of like on your own trajectory that you're kind of carving out based on your interests. And to me, it's like, what is most interesting to me, and like, what is the best story for me to tell? And Morning Brew over like technology consulting at Deloitte was like a no brainer, especially in retrospect. But everything's easy looking back, right? It's easy to see the trajectory of like Morning Brew worked out and got acquired for $75 million. It's led me to my next venture, which is now doing very well. And so in retrospect, it's great. At the time, that's why like everything you have to, like, I try to add as much context to like the then and there, like $120,000 in debt, living in my parents' basement with like all of my best friends, girlfriend, a lease, assigned job in Washington, DC. It's like a lot of friction to get out of like the status quo. And most 100%. People don't, I think. I think a lot of people are very comfortable in like their circles where they grew up and like the people and communities that they're most familiar with. And that's in a way beautiful for people who love that. And in other ways, like very limiting in what I think the world has to offer. And so I've definitely been someone who's always wanted to travel and explore more. And explore more doesn't necessarily need to be taking a trip. It's putting myself in a situation where I'm expanding like the horizons of like what I can do and what people I can meet.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love the idea of asymmetric risk. And I feel like a lot of the times when weigh decisions, people don't, I mean, I probably don't do this enough, like think about the downsides. Like a worst case scenario, like you move to New York, like maybe it doesn't work out. It's like, okay, within 3-4 months, you can probably get another job, move back. Like the symmetry, the downside, like it's capped. Whereas the upside there is like, okay, you love it. Morning Brew gets acquired, right? That's really interesting.
Just to double click on that real quick. I always do think like, what is the worst that can happen? And like try to put that in like a real understanding. We just hired a chief of staff, for example, who has been at Meta for a few years. He's been at DoorDash, like very high paying, prestigious jobs. And like, he's very interested in joining Beehiiv. And he was like weighing both options. And I'm like, look, what the upside here is crazy high. I think you're going to make an outsized impact on the business. You're going to have like total control over all these decisions. And I think we can 10, 50x what we're doing from here. And like, you will lead that initiative. And like, let's say that's wrong. you can go back to get another big tech job that's paying you just as much as you were getting paid like 6 months ago in 3 months.
Yeah.
Right. Like, so, I mean, I'm using him as an example because it's top of mind, but like I've done that a million times of like, even if I commit and go all out outside of looking like an idiot, which I'm okay with doing, like how long or how difficult would it be to go back on the path to get me back to like getting a normal paying job? And I feel like people overestimate like how big of a risk that they're taking when the fallback is like they could get back on their feet in 2 months and could be right back where they were if they chose the safe option from the get-go. So like that always gives me a lot of comfort.
I think it's just more tangible, right? It's like best case scenario, like there's so many different things that need to happen that are unpredictable. Like to your point, like you can't predict it looking forward, but it's pretty easy to think about like what can go wrong. It's like, well, this could happen, that could happen. So I think it's just easier. And it's, to your point, there's a lot of friction in people's daily lives. And, I was talking to Sean on another podcast, and someone told him, was like, hey, if you started tomorrow, like, would you choose the same project, the same investors, the same team, or are you just doing this because you have inertia? And I think a lot of the times we're just doing things because we have inertia. It's like what we told ourselves we need to be doing.
Yeah, totally agree.
We can tap back into this when we talk about, you starting Beehiiv, because you did it sort of on the side nights and weekends, which I think is a really interesting way to de-risk it as well. But let's jump into the LA story. You piqued my curiosity. I want to hear about the SpaceX story, and then we can go back to the timeline.
No, I mean, it's pretty quick. I haven't told it ever, but I mean, I did. I wouldn't say I'm a space nerd. I'm not going to paint myself like, oh, like I grew up like playing with computers. I love space. I think space is like fascinating. So like I've read books on it, watched documentaries. I've read plenty of like blog articles. Honestly, the Wait But Why series by Tim Urban, the 6-part series on Elon, I think is like one of the greatest pieces of writing that has like ever been done. That's always been like my number one recommendation for reading forever. And so I was reading that at the time. And like
not Big Desk Energy. Would you put that above Big Desk Energy?
Yeah, I'm removing myself from the situation. Although Tim Urban's amazing. It might be a 4 or 5 part series, whatever. But the multi-part series on Elon Musk, I think, is like one of the greatest pieces of writing that I've ever read, and like very inspiring. And so, love SpaceX. Applied for a job at SpaceX. At this time, again, this is like back when I'm living in my parents' basement. I had the weirdest background. I was not the weirdest, but I was mechanical engineering undergrad, but I never did any internships in mechanical engineering. So I had no business doing that. I was self-taught software developer. That's where I was like interested in building things, but like I never took a class in software development, and I've never actually done an internship or like built anything of value. So like I had this weird mix of like pedigree from like the university degree, but like no experience, and like interest in software. And but like had no experience doing that either. So I was like kind of like in this weird no man's land, which is why I couldn't get hired by anyone. But for some reason I like this SpaceX opportunity, like I somehow got like an interview, and they were kind of looking for like a mechanical engineer who knew software development. It's like this perfect mix. Granted, I was like way too underqualified. But I like proceeded through like the 5 rounds of whatever, spent like 8 hours building like a Pokédex project as like one of the coding projects. It was like super intense time project. And they're like, good, we'd love to fly you out to LA and like have you do like a final round interview. It's like a super day. So it's like a 10-hour day of interviews. And so the recruiter like lays out the schedule. She's like, you'll have this first call with these 5 engineers where you're going to present something. And if that goes well, here's the remainder of the day. And I always remembered that framing, like if that goes well, this is what the rest of your day would look like. And I couldn't comprehend that. I was like, why would you fly me all the way? Like, you mean there's a chance that I don't pass this first test? And like I just flew across country, and like I'm here for the weekend, but the rest of my day is done. And I didn't think that was a possibility. And I learned a very humbling lesson I was presenting something, forgot what I was presenting. And it's like one of the first times where like, I'm post-grad, I think I know everything. And these literal rocket scientists are asking me, like pushing back, asking questions on things I didn't know the answer to. And a great lesson I learned was just to say, I don't know the answer to that, and like would love to like learn more. Instead, I tried bullshitting rocket scientists on like what they were wrong about, and I just clearly was in over my head. So anyway, I failed that assessment. So they were like, "Hey, like just to let you know, like appreciate you coming out, but like we're not going to continue with the interview process." And at that point, like I've been applying to jobs all summer. I got flown out to LA. Like I end up moving to LA a few years later, but LA is like kind of where I wanted to live. Working for like Elon and SpaceX was like kind of a dream of mine, especially coming from like failed startup to no one would hire me, to like the come up of like a SpaceX engineering job would have been like incredible. And I remember just going down to Manhattan Beach and sitting on the pier. It's like one of the saddest I've ever been. I was like, I'm so close to like this like dream that I wanted. And I like in the most embarrassing way possible got like rejected after an hour of this day long interview. And I was just sitting on the pier by myself. And that was like pretty fucking humbling. But honestly, like a blessing in disguise. Like obviously you can't connect the dots looking backwards. Nothing from Morning Brew to Beehiiv to anything else would have happened. I would have been a super stressed, burnt out, purpose-driven engineer at SpaceX for God knows how long. So I don't know. But yeah, it's a pretty humbling story early in my career.
Yeah, that's amazing. I want to link that into how you've talked about, we're going to jump ahead here to the present day and then we'll go back to Morning Brew. But at hiring at Beehiiv, you guys really look for ownership mentality where it's like, because it's such an engineering based company, it's like we are very outcomes driven. It's like, I don't care how you do it necessarily, like as long as it's ethical, etc., and follows our principles, but the importance is output. What sort of principles, like how did you learn from that interview perhaps, and what to look for in someone to see? Like you mentioned, instead of bullshitting, like actually being curious and asking questions probably would have gotten you at least through one more hour of interviews. What sort of principles do you have at Beehiiv when hiring people that sort of fit that history?
Yeah, I honestly think there's a ton of biases that I have in hiring that are like kind of like through my experiences, in the sense of like when I think back to that summer when I was like begging people to hire me, and it's like I had all of the ambition and drive in the world, and like I would outwork anyone, and I made that very clear. But most people can't look past like the resume or prior experience to even give me a chance. They saw like no relevant experience, like you haven't built anything, you're unproven. And I'm just like a ball of energy. I'm like, I literally lied my way to get like my first $3,000 with like that Morning Brew situation. Like I will put myself in a situation where I will refuse to lose. And like, I'm the type of person you want on your team. And like, I could communicate that in so many ways, and very few people have the balls to like see that and be like, I'm going to make a bet and risk that like this upside is, it's asymmetrical risk. Right. And so that's like kind of what I've looked for in almost everyone that I've hired, is like, not me, because like, we have a diverse team. We have a bunch of different backgrounds and skill sets and much more accomplished people than me on our team. But it is that like intangible like dog in them to use Twitter speak.
That's
on
the checklist.
Yeah, just like that determination and the will to be like, I don't need to be told what to do. I'm smart enough to understand like what's important to the company, to our users, to the people that work here. I have the drive to figure it out, or to ask questions to figure out what I need to know. And I want to be proud of my work and build something that other people are proud of being associated with. Mm-hmm. And once you start to like look at people through that lens, like it's a very clear filter of people who are applying for jobs that just want a job, who just want to be associated with a company, who just want to be told what to do. And some people, which is like especially what I look for in a startup, is like, I'm pulled in 10,000 directions every single day. Like I can be a good manager and I can lean in and give direction, but like, it's not the best use of my time, nor do I have the time to commit to everyone. So I kind of look for people who can just take initiative. The hot word now is high agency, but like, that is like, that is it to a T, right? It is who is high agency, who can like scroll Twitter and collect like user sentiment of like, these are what users are saying about us. Like, this is what users are saying about our platform. And like, I don't need to be told or wait for someone to assign me this ticket. I know exactly where that lives in the code base. I will fix that. Yeah. I will launch it. Users will be happy. I'll even respond to the user on Twitter complaining that wasn't working. And like, I never had to run up like to my manager or to Tyler to get approval. Like, I know that was a net good thing for the company. And it's like those types of people that I try to look out for.
Yeah, that's a necessity to have at a startup, especially. Like, there is no option to not be working on the most important thing.
Well, I would say though, a lot of people in startups are very insecure because like the classic stat is 9 out of 10 startups fail. And so given you're in such an uncertain territory, you try to surround yourself with people who increase your odds of success. And a lot of people conflate that with who's like the most accredited, experienced person per resume that makes it look like the safe hire. It's like no one ever got fired for choosing like IBM or like whatever the saying is, right? And so there's been many opportunities throughout this journey where we were down to the 2 candidates, and one had a far more established Silicon Valley holy grail resume of like working at unicorn after unicorn. And another one just had like this fight in them and drive. They're like, this is the job for me. Like, I'm so committed to making this work, and like I will go the extra mile to prove it. And from the outside looking in, 9 out of 10 people will choose the person that has like the big logos and like the experience to say like, I was at XYZ company when they went from 0 to $1 billion in revenue. And it sounds amazing. And sometimes they are the right person. So I'm not like knocking that profile, but like that feels like the safe thing to do. And I think a lot of founders and even managers like go with the thing that is like, what limits my risk? But like as the founder, the only risk I'm not at risk of getting fired. My risk is like this failing, right? So like I'm not trying to impress anyone above me or like do the safe thing. I'm just trying to do the thing that has more people that we want to surround ourselves with that will increase the odds of success. And you can see that when you start to talk and work with people.
It's again, the downside there is like, you know, you lose a little bit of money, you have less runway, but you don't make the wrong hire and potentially spend more time trying to fix that. How do you go about it? I mean, I'm sure there are lots of startups that would love to be in that situation, but I feel like that, there is something to be said for being worth someone's time and being worth a company that someone wants to join, right? Like, how do you go about that in the very early days where you're unproven, you've got this track record a little bit, but like, why should someone join Beehiiv or another startup in those early days? Like, how do you go about actually attracting that talent?
Yeah, I mean, most of my time, the first 12 months of the company was trying to recruit engineers because we couldn't find an engineer that like met the bar threshold of what we were looking for. Because we were a no-name company who was probably paying slightly under market rate because we didn't have a ton of money and we were unprofitable. And so like recruiting the early days is very hard, but it's also the best filter in the sense that like the person who gets excited when like there's certain people who are like, oh, this is like a well-oiled machine. You plug me in here. I have like all of the benefits. I have the workflows, the processes, the team, the budget to hire more people when I need to. It's like, I know what I want to do. And then there's like what we had in the early days, which is like, we have the highest ambitions of things that we want to build. And there is no clear roadmap of how we're going to get there, but like you will play a part in that. Like you come in and you say like, hey, this is interesting. We should build this. Or I think that our time is best spent doing X, Y, Z. You can come in, make those suggestions, and we can do them the next day, which is not something you can get at like this massive, like later stage company or corporation. And so what you kind of sell is autonomy and ownership. And that either attracts people who like love the autonomy to be able to say, I can make a difference and come in, or it repels people, which is like kind of what you want, right?
What you want.
I mean, I was at one of my masterminds that I hosted, one of the founders tells people that they're going to work 7 days a week. And like, that's just the expectation. And he goes, that turns off 95% of people. And that's totally fine. Because when we find that 5% of people who are like, this, I believe in the vision. Yeah. I think that we can build like a game-changing multi-billion-dollar company here that I will get fulfillment out of. And like, that's where I actually want to be spending my time. Like having those people say, fuck yes, is so much better than, misaligned expectations or like just saying it's like a normal, 9 to 5 because that's what people want to hear. I think like having those very explicit filters helps a lot in the long run and easier said than done. Because in the early days, you really are trying to find talent and desperate momentum. So it's like, it's a very hard balance to have like a very, very high bar and also look for those types of things. But I think it's well worth it.
Yeah. So people shouldn't rush those hires, especially in the early days where you're like, hey, we need an engineer. It doesn't exactly fit the profile, but we really need someone. Like maybe still err on the side of not hiring that person just because they don't fit those values. Like be firm.
Probably one of the most frustrating experiences I had was like, we've been product velocity 1,000 miles per hour from like day one. And there's like it's not always the equation, but early days, like another engineer is like another X% of output, right? Like if you go from 4 engineers to 8 engineers, it's not necessarily 2X output, but like it's pretty close, especially in those days. And so all I am trying to do is get more engineers because I'm looking at this roadmap. That's like a 3-year roadmap that seems impossibly like difficult and daunting to build. And I was like, we need more firepower. And I'd bring in all these engineers who had like an amazing first like intro call, like vibes are there. They're excited. And they meet with like our engineering team, my co-founders, and they're like, not good enough. And it was so frustrating. And I was like, are they close to good enough? Like, can we just get them in there? And like, to their credit, they always push back. And we're like, because engineers only want to work with like their level of A plus engineers want to work with A plus engineers because a B engineer slows everyone down and they end up either breaking things, having to review their code, or they're not getting better from the other engineers because they're like a lower caliber, I guess. And so to their credit, they maintain the highest bar the entire time. And it was super frustrating because I just wanted more firepower. But like that decision paid off tenfold and still does to this day. Like we've always maintained a super high bar. And like, because then it's like chasing short-term rewards. What has taken up and consumed more of my time the past year or so is like the non-customer problems. It's like internal problems. And like we don't have a ton, but like as the company grows to 100 people, people want raises, promotions. They want to change teams. They want more responsibilities. They don't like this person on this team. Like you're dealing with I heard the other day, like when
it's a tribe.
In the earliest days of the company, it's me and my two co-founders who are super passionate and motivated about something because we believe something should exist in the world that does not exist. And the only thing that we're doing every day is building whatever our customers want. And there's no bullshit. We don't care about our titles. We don't care about our roles, responsibilities, reporting lines, processes. Like it's literally just build whatever the customer asks for. And that's us at 3 people. And now as you grow in the company and it gets larger and larger, less of your time is spent on solving customer problems and more of your time is spent on solving every other adjacent problem, right? Budgeting, reporting lines, processes. And so like it's something that I'm trying to instill in the company is how do we shift our focus towards like almost all time spent during the day is like, does this solve the customer's problems and make their lives better? And the more time we're focusing on that, the more productive we're being as a company, the more time we're figuring out everyone's reporting lines and processes and handoffs. Like that's like made up fictitious problems that like happens with bureaucracy. And I try to push back on that.
Yeah, we talked about this when we were in Colombia. The podcast from the Invest Like the Best podcast with the COO of, or the ex-COO of Instacart, and you know he was talking about like how much time are you actually spending on customer problems? Like it's probably not enough. It's probably not a high enough percentage. Have there been any things that you've implemented, or we can touch on one thing, and then we should go back into the chronological order, but. You at Beehiiv, I believe you have this like Google sheet where everyone in the company at the start of the week puts in like their one objective for that week, and you just reflect at the end of the week, like, hey, did we get this done? Are there things like that you've implemented, and talk about that a little bit as well, that have shifted people to be more customer focused over the time?
Yeah, there's a few things that I do. One, and you can probably gather this from like Big Desk Energy and like me writing the newsletter and like building in public. But I think being able to effectively communicate as a founder, your vision, the problems at hand, the solutions, the order of operations, especially as like a remote company. We are 95 people located across like 15 different countries. So we're in different time zones. One of the key things that I have to do is intake all of this information and feedback from users and employees and teams and distill it into like a list of priorities that are very clear of like, this is what we're building this week. Here's why we're building it. Here's the expected timeline. And here's what's coming next. And so I do a few different things. Every Sunday, I spend like 2 to 3 hours getting all of my thoughts on paper, and I write an email to the entire team that's like a full brain dump of like, here's reviewing last week, here's this week, here's the game plan, this is what we're going to get done. I implemented something called the weekly success list, which is, it's kind of born out of the weeks are so chaotic, and Friday afternoon comes around and I'll like finally like on the West Coast in LA, like meetings slow down at like 3 p.m. and I like take a step back and I'm like, I think that was a good week, but I have no idea, right? Like we grew a lot, but like a few users churned, but we had a huge hire and then we launched this feature, but then this bad bug happened. And I have no idea, like, was that actually a good week? Like, did we actually get a lot of shit done? Or was that just chaos and stress? And so my way of being able, well, the answer is it's always chaos and stress, but the way for me to be able to like more objectively measure that is like before the week even starts on Sunday, I create a list of like 15 things that I think we should accomplish this upcoming week. And it's totally objective. Before the chaos starts of the week, it's like, if I look up on Friday night and these 15 things were done, like that's a successful week objectively before we even got into like the mixing and matching of like priorities. And so I come up with this weekly success list. I send it in an email on Sunday, aligns the entire company. Like, this is our focus this week. We're going to get these 15 things done. In that same email, I create a Google form, very simple. It is your name and your top priority of the week. And so all 95 people input what their top priority of the week is. And so then we have 2 all hands meetings. We have an all hands meeting on Monday and an all hands meeting on Friday. On Monday, I pull up the weekly success list and we run down the list one by one. It's like all 15 items, and the people who are responsible, so I'm not owning all of them. They're like growth owns one, product owns one, whatever. one by one, whoever's leading that initiative shares like, this is what the priority is this week. And like, here's the status of where it is. So like, it's not me talking to people. It's like the people leading the initiative, taking ownership of like, I am aware that this is on the list. The goal is to get it done this week. And then on Friday, I pull up the Excel sheet of all 95 responses that people submitted the prior Sunday. And one by one, I'm the first one on the list. I go, this is what I said my top priority was this week. Here's like the status update. Like I got this done and this didn't work because something else came up, but I'm going to work over the weekend to get it done. Next person, next person, next person. So for 95 people, we've run through, and people think it's like psychotic from the outside. It maybe is, but like, I do it for a few reasons. One is, again, we're an entirely remote company. So a lot of people work in these silos in both like time zones and teams, and they like don't ever act with like the design team or like the engineering team. Right. And so if you pay attention for the 75-minute meeting, you actually get an understanding of what all 95 people at the company are doing and how it fits to the bigger picture. Ideally, the weekly success list on Monday clearly communicates like how all of these fit together with like the top line items. And then these are like the more granular, like which person was responsible for doing which piece of this puzzle to get that accomplished. It's also a way for me to like keep tabs on everything, right? So I don't have the chance, unfortunately, to like meet with every person on the team on like a weekly or even monthly basis, but this is my way to like check in on how everyone's doing and like what they're working on. And I also think it's very powerful in a company to like be able to speak. Like when you're at a company where only the 4 team leads speak, it's like you feel very underrepresented, or your work is kind of like buried in the mix of everything else. But in this, everyone has an opportunity to speak and have their voice heard of what they're working on, which I think is like really powerful. So it's some combination of like 6 different things, but it works really well for us.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, of course, because you can then disagree and you've got a platform to disagree, or actually say, I actually think we should be working on something else that's a higher priority, and you can have your voice heard. How do you go about, and then we'll get back to Morning Brew, so we can make the transition to Beehiiv, but how do you go about, it's Friday, you've got a ton of data, like what are you looking at? What data sources, what inputs, and then how do you go about linking that to these objectives, these 15 objectives, whilst also making sure you're not like, to your earlier point, managing everyone and telling everyone this is exactly what you should be focused on, what you should be focused on. Like that seems like a delicate balance. So what data points do you look at, and then how do you go about, transitioning that into a weekly objective?
Yeah, there's some recurring ones, right? So net MRR is like top of the line, right? So including people who churn, including expansion, including new users, like how much MRR did we grow per week? And I measure that Monday through Friday. Saturday and Sunday, obviously there's growth too, but Monday through Friday, we're all hands on deck. Sales is closing deals, etc. That's like the North Star. There's other like mainstays like inbox 0 on support queues. Like there should never be a point where we get to the weekend and like any user is still waiting on like a response from support. So that's always like a P0 item for us. And then, like outside of those two, it like varies, right? Like if we're going to launch a new feature this week, like which we are tomorrow, like one of our items this specific week is like launching this feature successfully. And like, it just like sends a signal, like we are going to get this feature done, QA live in production, and like the full marketing push this week. And then there's like other things, like a lot of times some of the engineering and product initiatives are 3 to 6 week initiatives. So I try to break them up in, and that's like the other thing is like, and I wrote about it in my newsletter today, for software is so interesting because it's infinitely optimizable, right? Like if you left it up to engineers to be ready to launch something, nothing would ever launch, because like there's always a way to optimize and make it like 10% faster, or you could like tweak the UI to be like 10% better. And if you wait for perfection, like you never launch anything. So you kind of have to have these like arbitrary milestones to force some sense of urgency. And it's a very delicate balance, because like there isn't a customer, like we don't have massive clients that are like, hey, if you don't ship this by Friday, we're leaving. So they're all like manufactured deadlines that I kind of create. I'm like, hey, we're launching this next Wednesday. And it sounds silly. And like sometimes like when it is like high stress and friction, like I can push back, okay, we can wait till Thursday, or like if it's going to break things, like push to like the next week. But I try to stay pretty firm on having these deadlines. And even though like I made up the date, we're launching Wednesday, there's nothing actually holding us to that. There is like a lot baked into that. Like the reason we prioritize those features are because dozens of users have reached out asking for these specific things, or like are flirting with potentially churning if we don't get them out. So like I'm dealing with like a bunch of unhappy users, and there's urgency around that. And then there's something around like you just have to get it live in public for users to play with. And then once it's live, there's like a whole different stakes. Like you're now getting feedback much quicker. So we're actually getting to a better final product sooner. And engineers also respond to things in production much faster because like users are literally using them, right?
Yep.
And so like we could spend months on like the very last 10% of any feature and we would never get it out there. And we'd be like optimizing potentially the wrong thing. The second you get it live in market, users will tell you exactly what works, what doesn't work. Engineers have ownership of like, hey, I ship this into like production. Like I need to make sure it's not breaking and causing a bad user experience. And like there's a confluence of like 6 different things that happen. And it just creates this like muscle of we need to be able to ship with intentionality and urgency. And then as soon as we ship, we collect feedback. Half the team is addressing feedback. Half the team's working on the next set of features. And we're just on this ride over and over again.
Yeah, I think you've either tweeted out before or said it before that, you know, you should, to your point, like you don't wait till it's 100% perfect. Like actually you've got users, don't guess what they're going to think, like use them as beta users for your product. What have been the benefits of that velocity? Like I think you guys take up my timeline every week with a new launch, which I think is awesome to see. Like what are the benefits of being so driven to have quick velocity of product shipments as well as using the user group as actual beta testers?
Yeah, I mean, I think you said part of it right there, right? The fact that we actually can, without paying, like we don't pay for PR. We've never paid for PR. We've never paid for press. Like we don't really pay for like acquisition, performance marketing, but not like marketing. And so the fact that we can take over timelines and distribute like new feature drops on a weekly basis and have created like a user behavior and expectation around the platform's always getting better. And each week there's like a totally new feature drop. It's like a very powerful owned marketing engine and narrative that we've entirely owned. It also just means the platform is constantly getting better. And it does a few different things. I think whenever we launch a new feature, it tells anyone who's like an existing user that was maybe unhappy that we didn't have the feature. One, it's like, yo, don't churn. Right. Like we just launched this. Like we're good. It's like coming. You don't need to go somewhere else. Like we have this now. So it prevents churn. It then communicates to every potential user in the market, hey, like you were maybe looking at Beehiiv, but we were missing these few features. Well, we just launched them. So now we just expanded our addressable market of like someone who we couldn't serve because we didn't have X feature. Now we have X feature, we market it. We're now attractive to someone who otherwise couldn't consider us. So it expands the market. And then like the third thing it does is it just creates the narrative that we are so totally committed to improving the platform that if you're weighing us versus other options or competitors, it is like, let me bet on the horse that is constantly getting better, who's constantly listening to feedback and improving the product, and has a clear track record of being able to move and iterate based on feedback very quickly. And so those three things work a ton for us. There is not without trade-offs in that, in the sense that when I say we launch things that are 80% ready, like sometimes they're legitimately 80% ready. And like, I'm okay because I know in the 48 hours after we launch it, we're going to collect so much feedback and we have engineers on standby that like the feature is going to actually end up being twice as good as it would have been if we just launched it, waited to 100%. The fact that we do 80%, collect feedback, and then a 48-hour sprint. But there's not without trade-offs of like creating the reputation that sometimes things are like buggy or like not polished. And you can make the argument like, oh, first impressions matter. If someone just signed up for the platform, it just so happens to be the day we launched a new feature, the feature isn't polished. Their first experience is this doesn't really work at all and like isn't really thought through. And it has a kind of a negative association with like the platform and the brand. And like that is a very real risk. And I think like a fair criticism that I see in passing on Twitter every now and then is like, oh, their platform's a little buggy. I think the trade-off of moving as quickly as we have and launching with that mentality is there are points in time where the platform actually is buggier than it should be. We've gotten a lot better. We have QA teams now. Overall, the platform is significantly less buggy, but early days we were prioritizing speed and velocity over like
other things stability outside of just a new product.
Yeah. Now that's not
how do you go about minimizing that though? Like, you know, you've got all this negative feedback, let's say, well, not necessarily negative feedback, but just negative sentiment. Someone churns, like what's the repeat buy like? Like, do you ever get people who've churned coming back, or how have you tried to minimize that downside back to our earlier point of asymmetric bets and risks? Like, how do you minimize that aspect of shipping fast?
Yeah, and I would say, like, going back to what I said earlier about trade-offs, like it is a trade-off. I willingly will take the fact that we are going to ship faster and get more features to market and be able to follow up, collect feedback, and iterate over the perfectly polished. We have tons of support documentation, tutorials. It's been QA'd a million times. There's 0 known bugs, but it took 3 weeks longer to get that to market. So the trade-off is like people in the past, and like much less so now, have experienced like a less than ideal experience, or it was buggy or like less stable. Again, like not ideal, and I'm not happy about that. But the trade-off, like I would take that 10 out of 10 times for what we do get out of the speed and velocity. And over time, we've gotten better. So like it used to be legitimately one engineer would own one feature end to end. So if we had 6 engineers, we would have 6 features being built at once, which means there's only one person kind of building in isolation. And I was kind of doing QA like the night before we launch it, because I'm writing the product update, and I'm like being like, how am I going to spin this? Is like, how is this valuable to users? So I write it, I test it, and I'm like, oh, this doesn't work. You need to fix this. Then I go back to writing. So I'm doing QA and content and marketing. Now we're much better, right? Now we probably have like 2 engineers ish on every feature. So like they're reviewing each other's code, so bugs go down. We have 2 to 3 people on the product team that focus a lot on QA. So like, 72 hours before anything makes it to production. Like we've been doing pretty extensive QA. Bugs still get through, but like there's a lot more extensive QA there. So like a lot of those things kind of come with like scale and maturity and process. We just didn't have the money to have like that many people all hands on deck at the time to be able to do the QA and the documentation, like multiple engineers. Like now we do. Yeah.
I mean, that's a trade-off of sorts as well. Like, obviously you could have used that money to hire someone, a different role, instead of someone who's more focused on QA. When did you feel comfortable making the decision to hire someone who's more focused, or just in general to hire more engineers to go on the same product? Like you could theoretically still have one engineer working on one product launch right now. So when did it become more important to reduce the downside of the bugs as opposed to just shipping fast? Like, was it as the product matured, or what was that sort of turning point?
Yeah, I think there's like a product maturity where now we're onboarding like massive logos that probably have less patience, and like first impression matters a bit more. Part of it is like, I think as hard as I push the team, I have enough self-awareness to understand like where to pick my battles. And like when I'm grinding the team of like, hey, next feature, next feature, next feature, and there's one person responsible for each feature, and they like, once I'm like, yo, you're up next, like we're launching that next Wednesday, like they're on the clock and they're like shipping nights, weekends to get this thing out on Wednesday. And then when it's not even like they get to the finish line and they're done. They get to the finish line, and because it's like 80-90%, there's so much, it's a flood of feedback from users. And so now they're even more stressed because they're drinking through the fire hose of feedback, and they're by themselves. And if they had like a vacation or they're sick or whatever, like there's no one else owning that because they built that product and feature in isolation. So like it's like very scrappy early day startup stuff, but like over time, like I can read the room and be like, we probably need like more than one engineer on these features. So like there's a bit of like, if Ben goes on vacation, someone else can step up and like build these things. Or like, when features break, which they always do over time, like there's not just the same person owning it. So a lot of it just comes with like also pleasing like the employees and like making it a better place to work. But it is it's a delicate balance. Yeah,
for sure. That's hilarious. Let's turn back the time a little. Let's go back to Morning Brew. You get this role, you're crushing it. You're sort of thrown into the pits of fire, really, where you're expected to fix things that you to your point earlier on, you didn't know how to fix or learn. What was that like, and what things did you build at the time for the team? Because you had internal customers. You're building all the internal tooling. Talk to me a little bit about the autonomy you had and sort of the feature sets you built at the time, and what it was like during those 2 or 3 years where you're at Morning Brew. I think you were there for 3.5 years.
Yeah, 3.5 years. Morning Brew was amazing. It was like the greatest experience I could have ever asked for, because I was just this like wide-eyed 22-year-old that was like trying to prove myself. And I realize now, building the startup, like why it was that way. Like they didn't have time to give me direction or like, sit in with like every decision. Austin and Alex obviously vetted me throughout the summer when I was working on contract. And they're like, we believe in you to make decisions. Like you are high agency enough to figure out like what is the most valuable thing you could build, and just build it and like let us know. And like I'd have like powwows with Alex and Austin, but more or less I was like heads down trying to figure out where I could provide value. Primarily was like the name of the game was let's grow the newsletter as quickly as possible. So anything that I could build, like I never built dark mode because dark mode doesn't grow the newsletter subscribers. It is what if I'm spending 10, 12 hours in the day, like what can I fit into that day that will help us grow faster? So we built a referral program that took a lot of inspiration from the Skim and their program, but an entire referral program of incentivizing readers to refer other readers, which is like on the surface level what it was. Behind the scenes, we had dozens of automations and triggers. Like if you're stuck like for more than 48 hours, like one referral before the next milestone. We had all sorts of crazy incentives and nudges to get you over the hump. We would do like MacBook giveaways. We would do all sorts of things to like try to get people to refer other people. It led to over 1 million new subscribers via referrals. So like a massive success and growth driver. It's like engineering all of that. In like the very early days, we would have like an HTML template, like literally like an HTML block of code. And the writer, Neil, would every night for 2 hours copy line by line. Like I taught him like the title of the story goes here. So copy and paste from Google Doc title to this part. And then I was like, the content goes here. And like I literally taught him how to copy from Google Doc into like an HTML template. And then after it was all copied in, I would copy and paste the HTML template into MailChimp, and it would preview and like be able to see like, did it work? And like, we'll send like a test. And like
painful, dude. This sounds painful.
This is also like what a lot of companies did at this time, right? Like, yes, there could have been like a WordPress, like a plugin to convert it or whatever. But like the way that we operated was like he worked in Google Docs all day. At 8 o'clock, he would copy and paste content from Google Docs into an HTML document. And at like 11 o'clock, we'd realize if it worked. And sometimes he would like accidentally delete like an opening tag or a period that would mess up the entire HTML. And I'd spend like 10, 15 minutes trying to debug it. And if I couldn't, we'd start over again and be up till 1 a.m., which happened probably once every 2 weeks. So after doing that for a year, and we started to scale the team and went to hire another writer, it became pretty obvious that most good writers were not interested in copy and pasting into an HTML document for 2 hours every night. So like it wasn't part of my job per se, but I was like, okay, what can we do to like increase the value of the business or operations? And I was like, let's just build a CMS. It's like a content management system where our writers will actually create the content in this system. Super naive and dumb and young of me. Again, like 22, 23.
You're building a whole new business, basically.
There's like
product.
hundreds of CMSs available. We had a custom Rails site that I built. A lot of CMSs are built on like WordPress. There's like other newer types of CMSs, but the way that we viewed it, or like naively me, was we're an email first business. And every other media company is primarily web-based, and email is an afterthought. So every CMS on the market was primarily like you publish, it's SEO optimized, it goes to your WordPress website, will help you collect emails. I was like, that's totally backwards from what we want. We're sending like a beautifully crafted HTML email, and like it goes from like the editor's brains into like an email and like a sent. And actually the website is an afterthought. And so being young and naive, I took like calls with like 10 different CMSs, and I was like, I think I'd just rather build my own, because at least if I built our own, and like this is like a classic like build versus buy scenario that a lot of founders deal with, or just like people at companies of what to do. There are certain vendors that we worked with at Morning Brew where it was like, we pay them the monthly fee, and when we needed to do things that they didn't currently offer, like you're kind of shit out of luck. You're like, hey, we really need this feature, and they're like, hey, well, that's not on our roadmap, and you have a very unique use case, so maybe we can do it next year. I'm like, well, we need this like next week. And so like that, losing that power of like, I can't dictate other companies' roadmap, and so how do I remove that risk from what we're doing? I can just build our own CMS, and it's whatever we need to build for Morning Brew and our writers is like what I'm going to build. A classic example of putting myself in a situation way over my head. These are before my Google days. These are before understanding what product management is or technical scoping docs or like anything. I didn't like map out what the CMS would look like, how it would work, how the pieces come together. I literally just started building. And so the anxiety, I woke up every single morning, I woke up with anxiety, expecting like, oh, there's no way I can just build my own CMS. Like there's going to be a time and a day where I wake up and I'm going to hit a roadblock where I cannot go any further. And if I would have put any thought into this in advance, I would have known this, but I didn't put any thought into it in advance.
Roadblocks.
And then I can't turn around to Austin and be like, I just spent, again, like I'm like super self-conscious. It's like my first real job ever. And I'm a self-taught software developer. I'm like, I can't just go to Austin and be like, hey, I just spent the past 3 months building something that ended up not being possible, and I just wasted literally like 1/4 of my salary building something that's a total waste. So like with that anxiety and like the inability to fail, I just like kept pushing forward, and push came to shove. Finally launched the CMS that was like worked extremely well. I think they just retired it like a year ago, but like took us from 150, 200,000 subscribers, like 4.5 million readers. And like we would hire writers from like these huge media companies who'd be like, this CMS is like better than what we use there, which to me was like the coolest thing to ever hear in the world. But yeah, I mean, that's just like one example of like why Morning Brew was like amazing. It was a lot of like scenarios like that of like, what can we do to grow faster, improve our operations, or just like make this business work better? And like, there was no game plan, roadmap, teams, responsibilities.
So
it was like, just go
out.
build that. And it was great.
Yeah. That's awesome. With that being said, like, how did you then know it was time to leave though? Or how did you feel like it was time to move on? Because, you know, the company's growing, you're still responsible for a lot of things and building, you know, key infrastructure that's, you know, lived on for 8 years or, you know, however long that was. When did you feel like it was time to move on, and why did you get that feeling?
Yeah, it's actually like a great jumping off point of like where I landed with the last question was like, what excited me about Morning Brew was the fact that there was no playbook. It was pure, just like white space to operate and find a problem and say, I'm going to spend the next 6 weeks like building something to solve that problem. We built like an ad management platform as well. So the entire sales team, which was ran on like Google Sheets and managing like 50 different advertisers per week, we built like an entire like CRM ad integration that like integrated with our CMS and integrated with the website and talked to advertisers. Totally custom built. Another super like naive, dumb thing. But like I saw all of these salespeople working in Google Sheets, and like we realized the night before the newsletter went live, we didn't have any of the assets for the advertiser. And I was like, how does that even happen? It was like super stressful. We're calling the ad agency at like 10 o'clock the night before the email goes live. So we just built a system to automate everything and streamline it, like had reminders and like a calendar. And so like just total white space. And so when I knew it was time to leave was after 3.5 years of doing that, we kind of had what I'd consider the foundation. We had a custom built website that I built, and like it was great. It was like optimized. It served its purpose. We had this CMS that the writers, we had now like 20 writers writing like, I think 4 or 5 different newsletters using the CMS. It worked seamlessly and integrated perfectly. We had this ad management platform that allowed us to scale and do like over $20 million in ad-based revenue all through this platform and like the sellers and everything else. And we built this like growth engine and referral program and dashboards. Like it was like there. And like my task and shifted from building these super ambitious projects that kind of did not exist, that we were bringing like 0 to 1, to optimizing the website for email collection and like tweaking the design a little bit, like kind of like smaller projects, like less ambitious, which is part of like maturing and like where we were at the company. And so after 3.5 years, I kind of felt like I had built the foundation. I got a lot of learnings, and I also like went in not knowing what product was. I found out what product was like while doing it. I was like, I understand how to grow. I know how to build these things. I know how to communicate to like the different shareholders. I know like what needs to be built. And I later found out that that was product. And I was like, I kind of backed into understanding what product is, but I think there's a lot more I want to do here. And so I kind of was like looking for other opportunities in 2020 just to do something and like get better at like product management. So some combination of all of those things.
That's super self-aware, which I think is probably a lot of the time not something people are or do, is take that in. So one question I have then before I want to talk about why you decided to work then at YouTube Music, I think it was. What signals, like, was it any, like just the decrease in autonomy or just like the increase in predictability? Like what sort of signals were you getting? And then why did you then move to a company where I imagine Google, you know, even bigger than Morning Brew, this is an assumption, but I imagine it's probably even less autonomous and more predictable.
Yeah, I mean, there's like a lot of interpersonal decisions in that too. Like Austin and Alex were good friends of mine. Austin like is the one who brought me into this ecosystem and world, and was like a good friend growing up. And we're both very opinionated people, I would say. And it got to the point where I kind of knew my value at Morning Brew for like not my job title or like what other people, like similar people were doing in my role. Like my value to Morning Brew as a company, I thought was like outsized for comp, pay, responsibilities. And I think they were going through a transition period, which became true because they got acquired right after I left. And like I didn't know that they were about to get acquired. And so they were starting to like shore up the business and like mature. They were bringing in like VPs from other organizations. They were bringing in more senior leaders to help legitimize the business and like kind of level up the entire team. So it was kind of like a changing of the guard in a way, where I was like the early guard, came in scrappy, unproven, have 0 things on my resume, but like know the business inside and out. And then there was like probably the influence of about to get acquired and having like to shore up your books and show that you have like real senior leadership at the company. Because at the end of the day, the company, business insiders coming in to buy the company as an investment, think they can grow it a lot more, and they need like the right type of leaders and people there. And so just kind of reading between the lines, like wasn't going to be me. I was either going to be hired over, and like I don't know if I was like super interested in learning from like a PM at like another media company, kind of teaching me how to do this job. So like definitely a little bit of arrogance as well. But I don't know. That's kind of like the high agency. Like I feel like I'm a builder, and like I had the confidence and somewhat arrogance of like I felt like I knew that business inside and out, and like I knew this industry and like the types of software that we could be building. And did I want to learn from like a VP of product who came from like a media company who's been doing it longer, but I didn't care for or respect as much? Like not really. And so I just kind of saw the writing on the wall.
Yeah. Did you then instantly also know you wanted to start Beehiiv when you joined YouTube? And also, why did you choose YouTube? Because I think you were looking at joining Ramp potentially, or those other companies.
It was the high times of fintech in 2020. I was funny enough. I got rejected from Ramp, and I think they take pride in that. Or the guy who didn't hire me, who I'm still not a huge fan of, takes pride in that. I like Eric a lot, the founder. But like they were only like 20, 25 people, and I saw the potential. Like I love tech and product, and fintech was super hot in 2020. And I follow like the hype cycle and the media and like the different companies that were being built at the time, and like clearly saw that Ramp was like different. I have the presentation on my computer. I created like an amazing presentation of like what I would come in and do, and like where I saw opportunity.
You have to, if you can, you have to share that. That's amazing. I don't know newsletter at some point.
It's another thing, like as far as like, again, how do you stand out as someone who wants to get hired for a job? Like I got like an interview or like a meeting with Eric, their CEO and co-founder. And I spent like a week building a presentation. I was like, here, I'm going to send this in advance. Like, here's what I think I can do. And like preface the call with that. We chatted for like an hour. Great guy. Didn't get hired by his head of product. Don't like him. But anyway, that was like another potential path that I could have went down. But yeah, I would say like once I saw the writing on the wall, jumping off of like the Morning Brew story, I just wanted like product experience. And I also saw like the venture back, like if you could join a company that has like that clear like upward trajectory at like a Series A, Series C, just like even financially speaking, like where's like the most upside to learn as much as possible, and also situate yourself with like shares and equity in a company that can be extremely valuable. I think if I ended up getting that job at Ramp, I'd be like pretty wealthy with those shares.
You'd be pretty
now.
Yeah.
So that would have been pretty dope as well. So I was just kind of like exploring different opportunities, and my roommate worked at Google. I have, the playlist Big Desk Energy. I'm like super into music, have always been really into music. And a job opened up at YouTube Music, had no idea what it means, didn't think that I'd actually get a job at Google. And I was also like very aware, like I know what I liked. I love like the 0 to 1 of like a startup. I knew that I liked 30 to 40 employees at Morning Brew a lot less. I knew that I was going to like probably hate like corporate life of like a big time tech company. But I also had the self-awareness of being like, I don't know what product management it is. And I had a few people in my corner that did like tech recruiting. They're like, hey, Google's like the gold standard of product management. And like, if you want to understand like how to like gather requirements, how to understand like the tech that needs to be built, the shareholders, the stakeholders, the engineering, the product, the design, like they have a pretty well packaged process there. And for me, I was 26, 27, like kind of just looking for like, I have the Morning Brew experience. I've seen the 0 to 1. I think I'd take something away and learn something new, and like the totally other end of the spectrum of like one of the biggest tech companies that's like ever been created. Yeah. And like pretty quickly I was right on almost all fronts. I didn't love it. Like I didn't love like the pace, the pace of work, or like the ownership or lack of autonomy, but I did learn a lot. I didn't know what a PRD was prior. Didn't know what a technical scoping doc was. And within like churning out like 6 of those in my 10 months there, like really refined the process of like, here's the idea of what we want to build. It takes communicating that clearly across a bunch of different teams and getting the right requirements in. And we still do that today at Beehiiv in a much more slimmed down version. But like I definitely kind of went in and extracted learnings that I otherwise wouldn't have had. So I'd say like mission success on the Google side of things.
I want to talk about that a little more. We can talk about the frameworks you learned from Google and what it was like. I want to touch on that a little bit as well. But I think what's really interesting, at least to me, I hope to people listening as well, is that decision you made and being so self-aware. Like what did you, what do you think made you so self-aware at that moment? Not just to know like your time was up at Morning Brew, but to know like, hey, I need refinement in these skill sets and these areas. Like, why didn't you just think, I've got a little bit of money saved up potentially, like I'm just going to go start this company now? Like, what made you realize that? Like, I think that's pretty insane to be that self-aware and have it all, work out quite well.
I'd say at the time I didn't know that Beehiiv was going to happen. Like when I was going through this framework of what's next for me after Morning Brew, I was pretty self-aware to, even though I felt maybe arrogant and cocky enough that I could be like a head of product at like a high flying startup or like a C-suite person at a high flying startup. I don't know, going back to like the resume and experience of like kind of being like a growth engineer to product, like head of product at like a Morning Brew type company gets me to like one of these high flying multi-billion-dollar Series A, like
not tech
startup companies. It's like a head of product there. And so I was like, where do I fill the gaps in my resume to gain experience and kind of like shore up the resume, which is also funny talking like, I was like kind of doing like a dual track. Like I kind of always knew what I wanted. I wanted to build things. I wanted to be a founder of a company, and I wanted to kind of like chart my own path. But like until you have, and you don't need like the permission to do that, you can do that at any point. I was also kind of doing the dual track of like collecting dots, gathering experiences, and like building the resume of like what would be super appealing to hire me as like a head of product at one of these high flying startups. And to me, it was like, let me go to YouTube, Google, figure out how to do product management. Let me learn like the actual trade of product and get that under my belt that I can speak to. And like my thinking was, if I wasn't going to launch my own thing, I could then, after the Morning Brew success story and the Google experience, maybe more than 10 months, I could be like, hey, maybe I could be like an early stage seed Series A head of product at like a high flying growth startup. So that was kind of like, I guess, the backup plan. But you asked earlier, when did I know I was going to build Beehiiv? Throughout my time at Morning Brew, it became pretty apparent that what we were building was unique from like the tech and foundational aspect, because we would have thousands of our readers who were also working at other media companies or publishers kind of being like, how are you building these email templates to look like that? How did you build that social share feature, which I built like 3 years ago when I lied about it? How do you have this referral program? Like, how does the referral program work? How do you manage ad inventory? What dashboards, what data are you collecting? And like the answer is like, we actually, like me and like my now co-founders built that entire ecosystem from the ground up entirely. Like we had the same questions. We like talked to people in the industry, and then we built like our own CMS, our own website, our own dashboards, our own ad management platform, our own referral program. And when people came with like, how did you do that? It's like, oh, I know exactly, because we were in the same like place that you were. We had no idea. We asked a million questions, and we all were technical and built it. So now I know the exact answer to your question. I know exactly how the pieces fit together. And like once you see the pieces fit together, it's a well-oiled machine. Like Morning Brew at the end of the day was like, those 6 different constituent parts. Obviously they had amazing content, they had amazing sellers, they had amazing writers, they had good leadership, but like we had like an engine that just like worked. Like we were growing by 2,000-3,000 subscribers per day. We knew that 1 in 5 were going to refer someone. We knew that we could monetize at a certain CPM and CPC, and like the whole thing just worked. And so as more people came to us responding to the newsletter being like, how did you build that referral program? One, I used to be like so naive. I'd just be so happy people wanted to talk to me about it. So I'd hop on a call for an hour and I'd explain like literally every single thing. And then it got to the point where legitimately I do that 6 times a month. And I was like, dude, I don't have time for this. So I literally wrote this article in Medium, it's still there, of how the referral program works at Morning Brew. And that was like almost like, it was the first like taste of, I had this very unique experience and skill set, and I just put it on paper and communicated exactly how I did it. Austin and Alex were cool with it, and it was like my first like piece of like thought leadership, I guess. Now when people came to me like, how did you build the referral program? I was like, just read this. And so like saved my time. Then I built up the reputation of like the referral program guy or whatever it was in the early days. But like it's like some
did you call yourself like, that?
I didn't, but like that's probably what I was known as. Is like whatever. I didn't
awesome.
Sure, I could have rebranded as that. That would have been a good move. But yeah, that was like my first like having an experience, putting it down, doing like thought leadership, and like having I don't know, and gaining some sort of audience and following from that. And from that, it was like that's only like that was the tip of the iceberg. We did so much other cool shit. So that was when I realized, what we had built was actually really unique. And the fact that thousands of people were coming to us asking about it means like there's clearly an appetite or a void in the market for this all-in-one solution, which leads to what Beehiiv was. And after I left Morning Brew, you know, I signed my job offer to Google, and I was supposed to go to San Diego for like my 1 week off. I still am chasing this 1 week off because I've been like Morning Brew was such a grind and a hustle. And like even when you go on PTO, like you're not like actually like totally checked out. I mean, at least like when you have like the ownership mentality that I do, like I'm still checking emails, I'm making sure things aren't breaking. Like I'm not actually ever checked out. The 1 week in between a job or 2 weeks or whatever is like the only time that you actually have like no responsibility. Yeah. And so I was supposed to go to San Diego. I got COVID. This is like peak 2020. Got COVID that 1 week in between jobs. So I'm stuck in my room in New York, and my mind is just racing. And I'm like, what can I possibly do? And it like all just clicked. And I was like, I think we can rebuild a lot of the internal infrastructure. Like there's clearly market demand, and like that is like my specialty and my experience. I called Ben, who's my co-founder, and he was like the first engineer I hired at Morning Brew. He was like, fuck, it's a lot of work. Like we just spent 3.5 years and we're still not done. And you're trying to like rebuild that. I was like,
go again. Yeah.
And it was so ambitious. He's like, yeah, we got to use Jake. Like he's like, we got to call Jake, who's like one of his best friends. We hired him at Morning Brew as well. And so we just started mapping out what it would take to rebuild this roadmap. And it was so daunting. It's still daunting. We're not even done what we mapped out that October, which is in 2020. We're still not done executing, and it's 2025 right now. But yeah, that's kind of like how it all started. And like, so it's kind of like COVID, partially luck, partially just like a lot of serendipitous weird things. And like, I think it would have happened one way or another, but it just all came together
at that moment.
Yeah.
The shout out COVID in that sense.
Dude, shout out COVID for a lot of things, right? Like I'm living in Colombia right now. Like we're totally remote. We hire the best person for the job regardless of where they are. Like obviously COVID was terrible for a lot of reasons, but like the silver lining and like what was good about COVID was me being stuck in my room for a week and us being a totally remote company and that being totally acceptable.
Yeah, and actually being potentially an advantage. We can talk about that later as well. What you built this on nights and weekends, was that conscious? Like I know you've talked a lot about, you know, the vendor contracts were really large, so you needed to fundraise for Beehiiv at the start in general. But what was the conscious thought process behind doing it on nights and weekends, and you know, eventually raising that first round? And talk to me about going to LA as well, because I think the stories there of you fundraising are pretty funny.
Yeah, kind of out of necessity, right? So everyone kind of puts entrepreneurs in this like super risk tolerant bucket, and I'd actually say like we are as risk adverse as we could possibly. Maybe not every entrepreneur, but like us for sure.
Maybe not Elon.
yeah But like we limited every step of risk. My two co-founders, Ben and Jake, were both married. One now has 2 kids. They moved up to New York for the Morning Brew job. They had like a very well paying job as like software engineers. They had a family to support. Their significant others were like in school, like post grad. I was single.
They need to support people,
right? I was single, but like again, I still haven't paid off my student debt. Like I have bills to pay, and I'm not wealthy by any means. And like I'm not into like, hey, I'm just going to live in like a shack, pay myself nothing, and hope that we can figure it out. It was like, let's get to a point where we feel good about the product, and like see, because like early stage is so weird, right? Like you have no customers, no users, no revenue. So like everyone has ideas. Everyone thinks that their ideas are like the greatest thing ever, and some of them are. But like until you actually get it into market and test any of these theses, like you have no idea what's going to happen.
There's no feedback.
And like they finally found stability and like have this good paying job at Morning Brew. I'm at Google, like trying to like do, you know, I'm on like that parallel track of like building out this skill set. And so we kind of came up with the roadmap of what we would want to build, and we just started building. And like we did it nights and weekends because we didn't have the capital to go all in ourselves, either like to pay ourselves, to pay our vendors. Like we pay probably right out of the gate, like 4 to 5 different software vendors on like annual contracts, which is just like the nature of the business that we're in. Nothing crazy, but like not the type of money that I can just like ACH $30,000 to the software vendor for this totally unproven venture out of like my personal bank account and like assume that that's going to be chill when I'm like 26 and like still in debt, right? So the game plan was like, let's just build, test things. The most stressful 10 months by far of my life, I would say, because I think the default action in life is like inaction. There's so much inertia against anything happening and like going back to the status quo. So I moved to LA, or I was like in New York, but moving to LA. They moved to Denver and South Carolina. They're married. They're having kids. They have vacations. They have weddings. Like I have vacations and weddings. And like there's so many things that happen in life where like the default de facto thing to do is like just go to your full-time job and, you know, just like keep it simple. And like to do something to voluntarily put yourself in a situation that is so high stress and unproven is like the more difficult path to choose. And so that entire 10 months, like you're kind of like waiting for like this shoe to drop where they're like, yo, like, I don't know if we can build this, or, you know, wife is going to school here. Like, I just don't know if I can like take on like the risk of a startup right now. And like, while we're building the entire time, like we have a few early theses of like how we are going to differentiate and market. One is like the referral program and like riding the heels of like the Morning Brew success. But at any moment, any of these like 15 competitors could also launch a referral program because they're reading the room and seeing what people are asking for on Twitter, which is what we're seeing. And like the second that they launch something that we've been building, like there goes our competitive advantage and the entire narrative. Yep. It's like, what have we been building 8 months for? And it's just like so high stress waking up with like, at any given morning when I wake up, one of like 20 competitors could launch something that totally makes our thesis and narrative like totally moot. And then it's like, we're also like giving up weekends, weddings, travel, whatever, to like be able to build this thing. So that was like probably the highest stress part of the journey. But we ended up.
What were those meetings like though? I mean, you know, it's let's say you're 5 months in, you know, you've got a bottleneck that's come up. You know, maybe it's a bad week and you've not made as much progress. Like, what are those conversations like with you three? You know, over Zoom, and like, that's kind
of like one of the hardest parts too, right? Like, I can't like get on them, like, dude, are you fucking kidding me? You didn't do this? It's like, dude, it's like I have a full-time job and like a wife. Like, I'm like, this is like extra work that I'm doing. So it is like such a hard balance to be able, because like I'm all or nothing, right? And like obviously to give them credit, like Ben and Jake are amazing. I wouldn't be here without them. But it is a very delicate balance of being like, hey, we get it. We all have like bad days at work. We all have like different things and other responsibilities. And we just put on potentially the most difficult, high stress thing on top of like everything else in life. So it's really hard to get on someone and be like, are you kidding me? You didn't spend all Saturday building this thing.
It's like, yeah, makes sense.
So it's like, dude, it was a very delicate balance. Like, I think a lot of people get stuck in this like valley of like trying to build something, and you're not quite at the point where you can launch or like have something. Maybe with AI tools now, it's easier to get to that point, and like it shrinks the time to build like that MVP. But at the time, like a lot of people don't get to that, or they don't raise the capital, or like, you know, I've never gotten like a fight with my co-founders. We have like an amazing relationship, which I actually think is like pretty rare. And it's weird for me to say that, but we never have. But like people have like falling out, different values. They value different things, or they have different objectives for the business, or their life pulls them in one direction and they can't give the same level of effort that you're giving. So like a lot of people don't make it to the other side of this, but we did. We raised a $2.6 million seed round that July. And as soon as that money hit the bank, this is how like I start off by saying we were like very de-risked. Like we had full-time jobs the entire time while building this thing. The second that money hit the bank is when I put my 2 weeks in and when they put their 2 weeks in. And so we never like took a gap in paycheck and like totally de-risked the business from that standpoint.
Yeah. Let's talk about how you went about that fundraising specifically and how you even were ready to get the product to a point where you think you could fundraise. But I want to ask one more question on the co-founder relationship, because I think it's interesting. And to your point, it's unique that, you know, you're still all involved and still all, you know, have a good relationship. So how did you go about aligning early on in the first couple of weeks, in the first month or so, to actually see if there's even a fit there, or to see if, you know, to potentially prevent, you know, that breakup from happening before you're even able to launch?
Yeah, I think, and we do it for hiring today too, of like in a preferred world, I'd rather do a contract to hire for any hire. I love, like there's people can interview really well, say the right things, have the right background. You notice pretty quickly when they get in the Slack channel, when they're like working at like 9 o'clock at night to finish something, when they say that something is going to get done and they actually finish it. When they take ownership, when they know they're going on like a PTO next week, and so they grind extra hard. It's not like, oh, I'm on PTO, I'll get to it when I come back. It's like, I'm going to finish what I said I was going to do before I go on vacation. And you start to see those things when you work with people. And so I'm a huge proponent of being able to work with someone before like doing any sort of trial period, before working with them. And fortunately for Ben and Jake, we worked together at Morning Brew, so we had like the ultimate trial period. Like Ben was the first person I had ever hired in my life. It was like when I built and coded for the first year and a half at Morning Brew by myself. And then when it was like, oh, we need to hire an engineer, we got hundreds of applications. And Ben was like this like 20-year-old wide-eyed college student who was like still having graduated from Clemson. And like he submitted a project that was 200x what everyone else gave me. And I was like, that guy's fucking amazing. And so like loved Ben immediately. And we were like in the trenches for the next like year and a half at Morning Brew building stuff. And like a lot of like the thoughts of like launching things. And like when we look at each other and be like, don't you think we could open this up to like so many more people? Like those are like the type of conversations we'd have at the office. And I think most engineers, it's cool building internal tools for a team of like 20, 30 people because you get real-time feedback and you're like sitting next to the user and like it's very gratifying to like improve the lives of your coworkers. But I think all engineers want to build like at the billions of scale, right?
Like
Like
millions and billions.
And so we've always kind of like fantasized about that. And so I worked with Ben for like 2 years at Morning Brew. And then Ben like could not rave enough about Jake. Ben was like, yo, Jake's like the smartest engineer I know. And I'm like, well, you're the smartest engineer I know. So like that checks out. And I overlapped with Jake for like a few weeks. He kind of like came into Morning Brew as I was leaving. So trusted Ben a ton and trusted his judgment on Jake, and me and Ben worked for a while. So it was like pretty de-risked from like a working relationship.
So you go to LA, you're fundraising, you're out here talking to your laptop all day. You've got your roommates who are hearing you pitch for the thousandth time a day. Like what was the process like of getting your first, the first funding? Like that must have been stressful as hell as well.
Yeah, like looking backwards and saying it out loud, it doesn't sound like the worst thing. It took like a month. It was like a very time box. Like I got to LA. We wanted, instead of doing like a Hamptons house, which is like super popular in New York, we did like a Venice house in LA. And it's like me and my like 6 best friends moved into this like nice big house in Venice. And it was kind of perfect. I was like already kind of checked out of Google. We had like a working prototype for Beehiiv. Like we were kind of ready to go. And so my objective was like, I have a month here. I'm in this house. I can't like do deep focus in this house anyway, because it's like all of my shithead friends. So it's like I can take calls though. So like my primary objective is like I'm just going to meet and network with as many people as possible and raise money to like go all in. And I want to leave this month with capital in the bank to quit my job, go all in on Beehiiv. And so, yeah, I mean, I was just a psychopath, right? Like pitching, it's like kind of like anything else. Like you're terrible at it. And like this is my first time like raising venture capital. You have no idea how people are going to react to things. It's just like repetition of you do the pitch and you kind of pick up on like what people are interested in or where people get turned off or like checked out or like don't really care about like your vision. And got told no probably 25, 30 times. Finally got like a few yeses, but like the yeses were like long tail angel check 5 to 20K. Like that doesn't fill the round. And so for like that first seed round, there's like a lot of like psychology at play. And it's kind of like you need to get like a lead investor. Like you need a whale to kind of put like the bulk of the investment down. But like they aren't going to fill the full round typically. So they need the reassurance that you have like a bunch of like strategic smaller checks that will fill the round. And that's also like a vote of confidence that like people are on your side and like got your back and like want to invest. And like the small checks can commit, but they're not actually going to wire any money until like you have that anchor check. So you're kind of like playing a game of like cat and mouse going back and forth. And finally I got connected with Howard Linzen at Social Leverage. At the time, he got introduced to me as like a fintech investor, and his background was like they invested in Robinhood, and he was the co-founder or like CEO. He created this company called StockTwits, which is like Twitter for finance.
Yep.
And so it was all pitched to me as like fintech finance. Like to me, like you get introduced to so many people during the process, like you can kind of like write off people before you even talk to them. Like, oh, that guy's never going to invest. Like not a good fit. So Howard very quickly was fintech investor. We're building like a media company. Like, I don't think he's going to invest. And he hits me up and he goes, hey, let's talk 7 a.m. Sunday. I was like, you fucking kidding me? like I couldn't tell if he was like feeling me out or just like being a psychopath or both. And like, because I already had the perception that he wasn't going to be a good fit, I was like kind of annoyed. But I was like, dude, like you kind of got to shoot your shot. Like, I'm not going to say no to like go to the bar on a Saturday night and like, so I can't get up on like a Sunday morning and take this call. So stay in Saturday night. I don't really need to prepare. Like I've been like pitching nonstop for 2 weeks. Talk to him at 7 a.m. Good call. He's like, hey, I'm down in San Diego. If you want to come down later this week, we'd love for you to meet me and my partner. It's like, okay, like I don't have a car in LA. Like I'm like literally out here on like a short trip. So I rent like a Mustang just because I don't know. I was like wanted to drive down the PCH. I rent this Mustang. And like the whole time I'm kind of like, dude, I feel like this guy's like wasting my time. Like, I don't think we're the type of company that he's going to invest in. So I'm like, I'm so like, I think he's just like, I'm like, again, like I'm like renting cars. I'm like taking time out of my day. It's like an opportunity cost. I'm like driving down to San Diego. We chat for like an hour and a half. Still have no idea if they're going to do it. Eventually they commit. They're like, yo, like we're in, we're down for like 2 million of like the 2.6 million. The second we have the lead, then you're like the hot kid at school, right? Like, now all of the small checks are like, yo, like, can we throw more money? Can we whatever? So the round came together pretty quickly after that. But yeah, it was just a weird, like, I was in my natural habitat. Like I was like living in New York, but I was like in LA just for the month. Like I had like this weird time box of like July is like when I want to raise money. You're like, it's just like such like a flywheel of like meeting people, networking, going to like a happy hour, taking a call, getting told no over and over again. And like the whole time, your idea is so fragile, right? We have no customers, no users, no product, no revenue. And every person you talk to tells you why you're an idiot and how you can't compete. And you start to like doubt yourself. You're like, you're like, yo, I didn't actually think about this guy. And this guy has such a great background and resume. Like maybe he sees something that I don't see. So it's definitely probably the most fragile experience fundraising, but worked out nonetheless.
Do you think that time box helped you because it forced you, like, what do you think the effect of the time box was?
Yeah, I mean, it's great advice now that I've raised 4 rounds. Like, you always kind of want to time box it because investors, the default for everything is like, no. Like, until they need to make a decision and be like, I either wire money this week or I miss out on this round. And if there's no threat of like missing out on like the allocation, they'll just sit on it and wait until like a bigger name comes in to like de-risk it, or like there's more of like a sure thing. And so great advice for like any founder raising any round is like, you never want to start like leaking that you're raising capital and like taking a call here. Like typically you want to build as much demand in as much as like a time constrained period as possible. So like Monday you hit like 8 different funds. Like, hey, we're raising, we already have interest. I already have calls with 6 other funds. I expect this to move quickly. Immediately gets everyone from like they're sitting back chill to like, oh, we need to look at this with like intentionality. And you just like rush through that. And that advice have worked well because we raised our Series A in 1 week and our Series B in 2 weeks. So I feel like I've gotten good at understanding how to raise a round and all the psychology behind it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's great advice. Time box it. And then I think you mentioned the word intentionality, like to your point earlier on, if you're just networking, like there's no intentionality behind it. There's no driving force or necessity to make an investment decision. So that's huge. Let's talk about you. I don't know if you still do this. You wrote down everyone who said no. I think you also sent them investor updates, or at least added them to a list. I want to talk a little bit about your investor updates and sort of 4 lessons that I want to sort of just lay on the table. You can sort of tell me which direction you want to go. That, you know, sort of 4 lessons from launching Beehiiv I think people can take away. But talk to me about the build in public and the rejection list. Like, you know, are you stuck?
Yeah, 100%. And they still are on the list. For sure. They are going to read it.
Kicking themselves.
A lot of them said there's no way that they could see a 10x from this investment back when it was like an $8 million valuation. And I'm very happy to say we have far surpassed that 10x right now. And I hope that we throw an extra 0 on it. Yeah, so like I've always been pretty big on building in public. A lot of it is kind of, I think there's so many different advantages to building in public. One, it is attracting people who think like I do and who are attracted to this story and the narrative. There's a much wider market of people interested in company building than there is like pure email newsletters, right? If I only talked about email newsletters, like there's a market for that, but it's much smaller than anyone who's interested in building a high growth startup or entrepreneurship or hiring. So I build in public as a way to kind of publicize like our updates. And it's also created like, I don't say like cult like following, but a following of people who know about the company, who follow it as if it's like a Netflix series of like, we're launching things. We have like competitors. We have like huge ambitions and goals. We have milestones. Like we are failing at things. We're succeeding at others. Like it is like, just like anyone who's been and worked at a startup knows, it's like a high drama ordeal. And I'm just like very open about that, which has done a lot of things. One, it highlights a lot of our users having success on the platform is like part of building in public. Part is like the product update thing that we talked about earlier, of like just being able to communicate new things that we're launching. And others is just getting people to follow the journey and ideally be like more like thought leader is kind of a lame word, but someone that you can learn from, and like ideally I'm providing value to people who follow me. And so
Right.
if you connect that philosophy with the throughput of what I said around like the Sunday email that I write and the weekly success list and everything else, I think there's a huge advantage to being able to effectively put your thoughts on paper, organize them, prioritize them, and communicate. Because I mean, there's like right now 15 different things going on in parallel within Beehiiv. And like the only way I can keep track of them is if I write them down and I can kind of connect the dots and communicate like why these are important, why they're doing them, who's owning them.
Look through the noise.
So the monthly investor updates are part accountability, part for me just to get my thoughts on paper and organize everything, and then part communicating to the team and investors and everything else. I write voluntarily, I don't have to for any of our investors, a monthly update that goes to all of our investors, all the investors who passed on us, all of my friends, family, colleagues, and employees. And it's like a look back at the prior month of what worked, what didn't, what we bet on, milestones, revenue, etc. And so knowing that I have to write that every month, one, is super clarifying and helpful. Two, like it's like a scorecard. Like the fact that I know every month that I'm going to have to share the results of the month, just knowing how competitive I am, makes me like work that much harder during the month to make sure that the monthly update is amazing. And so that's been like a huge advantage for me just as like a leader to be able to communicate that, but it's also helped us raise our funding, right? So when I said that we raised our Series A in just a week, it's because when you're doing well and you're publicizing the revenue and like the milestones, investors naturally are going to reach out and be like, hey, do you want to meet for coffee? The answer is no. I don't want to meet for 30 minutes of coffee and like tell you about our company. But like I'm already doing the hard part, even going back to like the Morning Brew story of like me just like, no, I don't want to tell you how we built the referral program. I already did the work. Like just read this.
Yeah.
I'm already doing the work of putting all my thoughts on paper of like how we're building the business. So I have this email list. I'll add you to it. And like that is like the full,
just read it if you agree.
You are going to get more insight out of that than if we met for coffee for 3 hours. And so a lot of these investors reach out. I'm like, I'm busy. I'm building. Don't really want to talk to you. I'm sure you're nice. Don't care. And like we're not fundraising, but I'll add you to this list. And so they got to see over the course of like 6 to 8 months exactly how the business is growing and how I think about the business, what bets I'm making, and whether it aligns with like, hey, this person knows how to operate a company. And when push came to shove and we were like, oh, I think we actually should raise a Series A, I already had dozens of investors who are warm and interested in responding to every single investor update. And it was so easy to be like, hey, you know what? Actually, we're considering raising a Series A. I reached out to like 10 people and they're like, yo, we're ready to go. So like we went from that realization on a Friday or Saturday morning is when I sent those emails. And the following Friday, we had 2 term sheets in hand. So 6 days to 2 term sheets. But that sounds great as a headline. It took like doing the company growing, but also the monthly updates to be able to communicate everything and nurture those relationships.
Right. 100%. That's awesome. We should talk about how you went about hiring in the early days when you didn't have as much money. I want to touch on that, but real quick, I wrote this down. That's sort of going through this, you know, for your initial launch, you also built up a wait list of customers. I think that's really smart. You also aligned the initial angels to be customers as well. Like you were selective with that, or I don't know if selective, maybe just prioritizing.
Anyone wanted to give us money, but if they had a newsletter,
yeah, that was preferable. So I think that's really smart. And then also something that we can talk about this a little bit, but early on you refused a lot of white label requests, or at least a couple. I think that's really interesting. And I think you've been very conscious about building a brand in the early days, verifying the initial users by messaging them. You know, that's a way to verify, but also a way to give a touch point to, you know, the founder and the team in general. So touch on the refusing to white label a little bit and just building that brand in the early days.
Yeah, that one of the harder decisions. There was like a big time media company who was interested by the Morning Brew story and was interested in what we were building. And they were like, hey, like we don't have this internal infrastructure. We're launching a huge newsletter initiative. Will you basically custom build this for our team? And we will pay you several $100,000 a year. And at the time we were making, I think like $8,000 a month. So like the several $100,000 was like a massive like step function in revenue. And I was like, again, like my job is like, can we pay the bills? Can we continue to grow and invest in the business? Like that was a large sum of money with a huge logo. And I was like, we should 100% do that. And the engineers are the ones who pushed back, and they understood what it means to like fork your code and have two different code bases. And like now we're like basically a dev shop for this one company, which is not always aligned with what we want to be building for like the actual company and users and like our vision of what this can eventually be. And so honestly, the engineers pushed back more than I did. It ended up being like the biggest blessing in disguise, right? Like if we would have done that, it would have been short-term capital and revenue, but we would have sacrificed so much product velocity and attention and focus to like solving the actual problem that we're trying to solve with Beehiiv. And I'm sure we'd still have them on contract, and it would be a total distraction now. So it's like one of those things of like putting off the short-term wins for long-term gains, and definitely glad that we went in the direction that we did.
Yeah, that's awesome. Soon after, I mean, I think only 6 months into Beehiiv, you know, you're making a few $1,000. I think you're at like 25K MRR. You know, you can tell the story, but you know, Andrew passed away, which is obviously horrible. I want to transition that into talking about how you hired two really important people who are still at Beehiiv. But yeah, talk to me about that a little bit.
A hell of a transition and segue, right?
Yeah.
I'll see how elegant I can do this transition.
Sorry.
No, it's all good. I can work with it. The time and place, again, I think is all super important, right? So up until this point, like not too long ago, I was in my parents' basement with 49 cents and had no money. I was like down to do any project that would pay
Negative
me.
money.
Made a bet on myself. We joined Morning Brew, incredible experience. Morning Brew got acquired. We're on this upward trajectory, and we make a big bet that we can build this company. And again, the classic stat, 9 out of 10 companies fail. And so every odd is against us to succeed. And we just talked about the fundraising. For a full month, I had 40 plus really smart investors tell me there's no way you can compete in this market with Substack and MailChimp and these dozens of other companies. Facebook just launched Bulletin, which is like their attempt to get into emails. Twitter just acquired Review. So there's like legacy players, there's new players like Substack, and then there's like the biggest tech platforms in the world who are now suddenly interested in paid newsletters. And you're telling me that you and your two co-founders are just going to, with $2 million, are going to take on like all of these incumbents. And so obviously like the odds are always stacked against you. And we came out of the gate swinging. Andrew was like a true unicorn engineer. Like with Cursor and the tools today, he'd be like 1,000x engineer. I can't even comprehend how good this guy would be. But like I've never seen output and tenacity like this guy. And there's like a longer story to how we met like at the Morning Brew days, but he joined us from the get-go. He worked for free initially because we didn't have any money, just to prove himself. And he always kind of wanted to be like a CTO. Took a chance on us. We took a chance on him. Worked out incredibly well. So it was my two co-founders, and he joined like from the very beginning. I'd say like basically a co-founder. And like we come out of the gate swinging. We go from 1 million or 1K MRR to 2 to 4 to 10. We're at like 15K MRR. It's like clearly upward trajectory. And you finally feel like, oh, this has legs. Like I think momentum. We can build this thing. And then Andrew unfortunately passed away suddenly. And like he was like by far the most valuable person at the company. He was the smartest, highest output, most senior engineer, been there, done that, has been building tech companies for like 12 years. And it was just at the time, it's funny to say scaling issues when we were at like 15K MRR, but like just the way that we built it in the early days, like we were hitting scaling issues, and like he was the one that was solving our scaling issues. So we have customers complaining, bitching at me, like the platform's not working, it's super buggy. Meanwhile, like we just built up all this goodwill and momentum, and like we're on this, I wouldn't say rocket ship, but there was an upward trajectory. And now like the most important person who had all of the context and experience and was leading us out of these like tech problems passed away. So like on a purely like personal emotional level, I've been fortunate where I haven't had like any close friends or family pass away. So he was like the first person, and he was like the nicest person imaginable. And then on like the professional level, which sucks to conflate the two, but it's like impossible in like this early stage mix up of like startups and work and everything to not overlap like the personal of like losing a friend. And also like, what does it mean for like the company, the people whose paychecks we're paying who are dependent on us like scaling and growing. And like, I was convinced that we were going to like literally fall apart after he passed away, just because like the scaling issues and everything else. It's like taught me a lot. It's like, not to flip everything into a lesson, but like there is no roadmap or trajectory or playbook for like startups and entrepreneurship. Like there is no playbook or like no, like even like my most established investors were like, I have no idea how to like deal with this situation. Like I've never been through something like this. And it was a total like fuck around and figure it out type. Like my co-founder was learning a new coding language over the weekend. People were working like nights, weekends, trying to figure out like how to fix things. So super difficult. And not that there is much of a silver lining at all, but it is as much of a shit show and stressful all of the startup journey has been. Going through that puts a lot of things into perspective. And I feel like the different problems that I encounter on like a day-to-day basis today feels like absolutely nothing in comparison to like those early days when everything was so fragile, when the platform was a tenth of what it is today. And we had like probably the most important person, like our co-founder and CTO, pass away. So that was the low of the journey by far. And then to seamlessly segue that into how we hired our next CTO and COO. Cause it's unrelated, but useful nonetheless in like early startup hiring and just like working with constraints, I'd say is like, we found after a few attempts, another CTO who was like super well compensated, accomplished. And we found a COO that I had worked with previously at my Morning Brew days. She was like a vendor at an email company that we used at Morning Brew. Both were incredibly overqualified, amazing people, the right type of people that we wanted to hire. But we had like $1.5 million in the bank, and their salaries combined of what they were getting paid would be like 40% of our bank account. And so it's like a classic constraint of like, what do you do in that situation? Is it, you don't want to not hire them because they're like the right people for the job, but you can't just pay them what they're asking for to like match their past salary. Cause then nothing matters anyway. You're going out of business because the company's done. So I just came up with this idea of like, we're growing on this clear trajectory of like 8K, 10K, 15K, 17K. Like what's an amount of revenue that we're bringing in that I'm comfortable being able to pay you more? And because we had this clear trajectory, I just tied their compensation to like revenue milestones for the company level. Even though the CTO is not in charge of revenue, it was like, hey, we're just going to continue building and shipping and we will grow revenue. And once we hit like 25K in MRR, both of your salaries will go up 50K. And once we hit 50K in MRR, your salaries will go up another 50K. So it was basically like a plan to eventually get them to like the compensation that they were asking for, even though it would take like 18 months of growth to be at a point where we can actually afford to pay them. And it's also going back to like a filter, like a pretty big gut check of like how much you actually believe in this and how much you want to be in here. Because if you just want like a good paying job that can pay you like what you're getting paid now, like you can find that probably anywhere else. I'm asking you to take like a 50% pay cut. And like, I think, and I'm pretty confident we'll get to the point where we can pay you what you want, but it might be a year and a half.
You have to believe that as well.
And there's no guarantee, and you're going to be a part of that. And both obviously took in, they both earned out, and like now we're getting paid like whatever they wanted to get paid. But yeah, it's just like a classic, like again, no playbook, and you have to work with constraints in any given situation. Yeah.
It's super high agency to your point. It's just being creative and just figuring out a way to go about it. I want to touch on one story, which I think is insane. Like 18 months or like 6 to 12 months after that moment where you bring on these new hires, you basically rejected a huge acquisition offer. What was that decision like in perspective of, you've got a growing company, you've got this product, you've got all these stakeholders as well as, employees and investors. What was that experience like? And what was that like?
Yeah, well, I guess the caveat is like, we received a verbal offer, and you never know. Like the more that I've learned around fundraising, contracts, high dollar deals, like there's a huge difference between a verbal and like actually getting everything signed, wired, and done. So TBD on like what would have ever happened with this offer. I'd say like it's important to understand the context of, I think a lot of people don't understand like the pref stack and like what happens in an acquisition. And so a lot of people see the headlines of this company got acquired for $1 billion. But if that company was previously valued at $2.5 billion, like the employees and entrepreneurs and founders did not make any money on that deal. But no one knows that. Everyone just congratulates them, like congrats on your $1 billion exit. So pref stack and valuations matter a lot if you are going for an exit event at some point in the startup journey. And so at the time, we were pre-Series A. We were probably making around $1 million ARR or so. And we got an offer to get acquired for $30 million. at the same time, like the person didn't know this, but we were also raising our Series A. We were raising 12.5 million at a $65 million valuation. And so there's a very like big fork in the road moment of $30 million today where I have less dilution, more of the company. I walk away with a few $1,000,000. I've been doing this for a year and a half, like pretty great outcome by all means, right? Like if you would have told me back when I was either had 49 cents in my bank account or just left Morning Brew and had COVID in my room instead of going to San Diego, that in 2 years I could have like $7 million in my bank account for something that we had built and like that I'm proud of. Pretty amazing upside. And like, I'd probably say yes to that, like 9 out of 10 times.
Yeah.
And like the one thing I didn't realize at the time, and it took me to like having both on my plate at the very same moment to realize like the second that we take the 12.5 million at a $65 million valuation, like not only does that $30 million value acquisition go away, anyone who could have bought us for $30 to $60 million is no longer like on the playing field, right? Right. Like we raised at a $65 million valuation, and like ideally Lightspeed, who invested in that round, wants at least like a 10x from there. But like even say 2x as like a bad outcome out of that. That means like an acquisition at like $130 million. So then you start thinking like, again, at this stage, we're pre-Series A. Someone could offer 20, 30, 40, $50 million. And like me as Tyler Denk walks away with a few $1,000,000, like happy camper. But the second we take this money at a $65 million valuation, the floor is like 130. And so like how many companies actually have the balance sheet to be able to pay $130 million for a company? So we just went from maybe hundreds of thousands of companies to like maybe 10,000 companies can acquire us once we take that Series A money. And I think that's something that goes totally overlooked when raising capital, where like, as a hypothetical, we're not raising. But if we were to raise and let's say $1 billion valuation later this year, sounds amazing. The headlines are great. My mom would call me, friends would call me like that's sick. But like what I actually just signed up for is either an IPO or finding the one of 10 companies who could eventually spend like $3 to $5 billion to acquire us in the future, or like being profitable, right? But totally different trajectory as well. And so I just think the opportunity cost and trade-off, or like once you accept that capital to a higher valuation, like you just cut off so many companies who could eventually be an exit opportunity for you. And it was having both of those on my plate at the very same time, which made that so real for me. But yeah, honestly, we said fuck that to the 30 million, and we're building and we're doing now. Don't regret it at all.
You've raised more than 30 million now, so like it's clearly working out. We'll wrap with this, but I want to ask, do you think if you didn't have those two offers at the moment, at the same moment in time, you would have reacted differently, or that just made it more real to the reality of the situation?
I think it definitely made it more real. I mean, it's hard to say, right? Like if I was offered $30 million, like, risk-free, like this thing's done, I walk away with $6 to $7 million. And I didn't have a Series A. Like we basically had the term sheet already done. Like we were moving forward. So like that made it much easier to be like, hey, like we're already at double the valuation and we're going to scale this thing. Right. So I think that definitely made it easier, but it having both at the same time gave me that perspective that like I never thought about. I was just like, hey, we raised a little bit more money, valuation goes up, we keep building, we keep scaling this thing. It was until Austin Reed, funny off, who like kind of explained it to me. He's like, you being selfish for you, like you can walk away with like an amazing outcome and do whatever you want. And then going all the way back to the beginning of the pod, trade-offs are everything. I wake up every morning at 5:30, stressed out of my mind till 9 p.m. when I finish working every night. And like, this is like an option that I choose, right? Like I like chose this life. I could be on a beach like a nice little house, surfing, eating fruit, and go a week at a time without touching my phone. I don't have to put myself through the stress. And so, I mean, I'm a psycho and I enjoy it, but I would say like that is like the trade-off, right? And so choose it, like the opportunity cost of like, yes, of course this company can grow to be $1 billion, $2 billion, $3 billion company, but do you want, if that $3 billion is 10 more years of hustling, or I could take 100 million now and just like enjoy my life. Like there's definitely a trade-off there at some point. And optionality is kind of like Austin tried drilling into my head, is like, you want to have optionality. Raising capital lowers your optionality. And so I'm happy, I'm fortunate right now. We're growing by $1 million a month. We're in control of the board. The company's good. The board's good. We're growing quickly, and like no regrets on anything that has been done up until this moment. But yeah, things are good. Thanks for having me.